The night the Mafia boss saw the impossible. Seoul was a city that never truly slept. Even at midnight, neon lights burned across the skyline like artificial stars, reflecting against the cold waters of the Han River. Expensive cars moved quietly through the streets of Gangnam, while powerful men conducted business in glass towers above the city. But beneath that polished surface, another world existed. A world of crime, power, and silent wars. And in that world, one name made even the most dangerous men lower their voices. Kang Tae-jin. To the public, he was a wealthy businessman who owned luxury hotels and nightclubs across South Korea. But in the shadows, everyone knew the truth. Kang Tae-jin was the most feared mafia boss in Seoul. His organization controlled gambling networks, underground casinos, and powerful criminal alliances stretching from Busan to Tokyo. Men who betrayed him disappeared. Men who challenged him never survived. But despite all his power, there was one thing Kang Tae-jin could never control. His daughter. 8-year-old Kang Min-seo had not spoken a single word in nearly 3 years. The silence began after the night Tae-jin's enemies tried to assassinate him. Gunshots had shattered the windows of their home. Bodyguards fought attackers in the hallway. Min-seo had witnessed everything. From that night forward, she stopped speaking. Doctors called it trauma. The best specialists in Seoul tried to help her. Psychologists, child therapists, speech experts from America. Nothing worked. The little girl remained silent. Her eyes empty. Her voice gone. For the most powerful man in Seoul, it was a defeat he could never fix. And it slowly destroyed him. One cold autumn evening, Kang Tae-jin entered a small late-night restaurant near the Itaewon district. The place was quiet. Simple wooden tables. Soft jazz music played in the background. It was far from the luxurious places he usually visited. But Tae-jin liked the anonymity. No one in the restaurant recognized the man sitting quietly in the corner booth. Beside him sat Min-seo. Silent. Still. Her small hands folded on the table. The waitress approached them. She was clearly not Korean. Her skin was deep brown, glowing warmly under the restaurant lights. Her name tag read, Io Adeyemi. She was a young African woman in her mid-20s. A foreign worker trying to survive in Seoul. Io had moved from Nigeria 3 years earlier, taking multiple jobs just to support her family back home. She had no idea who the quiet man in the corner booth truly was. To her, he was simply another tired father. She placed a small bowl of soup in front of the girl. Min-seo didn't touch it. She rarely did. Io watched the child carefully. Something about her reminded Io of someone she once loved deeply. Without saying anything, Io slowly sat down beside the girl. Tae-jin frowned slightly. No one approached his daughter without permission. His bodyguards near the door immediately stiffened. But Tae-jin raised his hand. He wanted to see what this woman was doing. Io gently pushed the bowl closer. Still no response. Then she did something unexpected. Very softly, she began to sing. It wasn't Korean. It wasn't English. It was a quiet Yoruba lullaby from her childhood. A song her mother used to sing during warm African nights when the power went out and the world felt peaceful. The melody filled the small restaurant like a whisper. Customers slowly turned their heads. Even the kitchen staff paused. Then something happened that froze Kang Tae-jin's heart. Min-seo lifted her head. Her eyes slowly moved toward Io. For the first time in months. The little girl smiled. A real smile. Small. Fragile. But real. Tae-jin's chest tightened. He leaned forward in his seat, barely breathing. Io kept singing gently. And Min-seo reached out, touching the waitress's hand. 3 years. 3 years of silence. And somehow, a poor immigrant waitress had just reached the child no doctor could help. When the song ended, the restaurant fell quiet. Io smiled warmly at the girl and stood up. Then she returned to her work, unaware that the most dangerous man in Seoul had just witnessed something impossible. From the shadows of the booth, Kang Tae-jin stared at her. His mind racing. His heart pounding. And for the first time in years, hope appeared. But he also felt something else. Suspicion. Because in his world, miracles never happened by accident. And Kang Taijin was about to begin watching the African waitress very closely. He had no idea that this woman was about to change his life forever. The next evening, Seoul's skyline shimmered beneath the fading glow of sunset. From the top floor of a glass skyscraper in Gangnam, Kang Taijin stood silently beside the window of his office. Below him, the city stretched endlessly, neon lights, moving traffic, people living ordinary lives. But Taijin wasn't thinking about business. He wasn't thinking about his criminal empire. For the first time in years, his mind was focused on a single person. Io Adeyemi, the African waitress. The woman who had made his silent daughter smile. Behind him, his most trusted lieutenant stood waiting. Park Do-hyun, a former Special Forces soldier who had served Taijin loyally for over a decade. "Boss," Do-hyun said carefully. "You asked for information." Taijin slowly turned around. "What did you find?" Do-hyun placed a thin folder on the desk. "Her name is Io Adeyemi, 26 years old. She came to Korea from Nigeria 3 years ago on a work visa." Taijin opened the file. Inside were photos of Io. Leaving the restaurant. Taking the subway. Walking home alone late at night. "She works 2 jobs, Do-hyun continued. Waitress at night. Cleaning offices during the day. No criminal record. No connections. Nothing suspicious." Taijin closed the folder slowly. But his instincts told him something different. In his world, coincidences didn't exist. No one randomly appeared and reached his daughter like that. Still, something inside him wanted to believe it was real. "Keep watching her," Taijin ordered quietly. "Yes, boss." That night, Taijin returned to the small Itaewon restaurant. Minute Seo sat beside him again. Silent. Motionless. The moment Io stepped out from the kitchen and saw them, she smiled politely. "Welcome back," she said. Her Korean carried a soft foreign accent. She approached the table carefully. But something incredible happened. Before Io could say another word, Minute Seo suddenly lifted her head. Her eyes locked onto the waitress. Then she slowly raised her small hand, pointing at her. Io blinked in surprise. "Oh, you remember me?" The little girl didn't speak. But her eyes followed Io everywhere she moved. Taijin noticed everything. Every movement. Every reaction. He had never seen his daughter respond to anyone like this. Io placed the same bowl of soup in front of Minute Seo. Again, the girl didn't eat. But she didn't look away from the waitress. Io sat down beside her again. "You're shy, aren't you?" she said gently. Still silence. Then Io began humming again. The same soft Yoruba lullaby. Once again, the entire restaurant seemed to grow quieter. And once again, Minute Seo smiled. Taijin felt something tighten in his chest. Io picked up the spoon. "Can I try something?" she asked Taijin politely. He nodded slowly. Io dipped the spoon into the soup and held it near Minute Seo's mouth. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the little girl opened her mouth and took the first bite. Taijin froze. 4 months Minute Seo had refused to eat in public. But now she was eating calmly. Because of this woman. Across the room, Taijin's bodyguards exchanged stunned looks. Io smiled softly. "There you go, good job." Minute Seo ate another spoonful. Then another. Taijin couldn't remember the last time he felt this helplessly emotional. His daughter was finally responding to someone. Over the next 2 weeks, Taijin returned to the restaurant every night. And each night, the same miracle continued. Minute Seo laughed quietly during Io's songs. She ate when Io fed her. She even began playing small hand-clapping games with the waitress. But one strange thing became obvious. Minute Seo ignored everyone else. Completely. Doctors. Teachers. Bodyguards. Even her own father. But with Io, she was different. Alive. Happy. One evening, Taijin finally spoke to her directly. "Why are you doing this?" he asked. Io looked confused. "Doing what?" "My daughter. You treat her like you know her." Io smiled gently. Then she said something that made Taijin's heart pause. "She reminds me of someone." "Who?" "My little sister." Io sat quietly for a moment. "She stopped speaking when we were children," she explained. "Something terrible happened in our village. Everyone thought she would never talk again." Taijin listened closely. "What did you do?" Io looked down at the table. "I sang to her. Every night. 4 months. Until one day, she spoke again." Taijin's eyes darkened slightly. "Did she recover?" Io nodded. "Yes." Then she smiled warmly at Minute. "Children don't need pressure. They need patience." For the first time in many years, Kang Taijin felt something strange. Respect. But while hope slowly grew in his heart, danger was quietly approaching. Because someone else had noticed Taijin's nightly visits to the restaurant. Someone who hated him. Someone who had been waiting for the perfect opportunity to strike. And they had just found his greatest weakness. His daughter. In Seoul's underworld, power was built on fear. And fear had only one rule: never show weakness. For more than 15 years, Kang Taijin had ruled the criminal world of Seoul with absolute control. Rival gangs had tried to challenge him before. None of them survived. But even the most powerful king eventually creates enemies. And one of those enemies had been watching him very carefully. Across the city, inside a luxurious underground casino in AfroK, another powerful man sat at the head of a long marble table. His name was Lee Sung-minute. Once, he had been Taijin's closest ally. Together they had built the largest criminal network in Seoul. But greed had destroyed their partnership. 3 years ago, Lee Sung-minute tried to secretly take control of Taijin's operations. Taijin discovered the betrayal. The punishment was brutal. Sung-minute lost half his territory overnight. His men were arrested. His money vanished. Since that day, Sung-minute had only one goal: revenge. But revenge against Kang Taijin required patience. Because Taijin had no weaknesses. Until now. One of Sung-minite's informants stepped forward. "Boss," the man said nervously. "We confirmed it." Sung-minute slowly raised his eyes. "What did you confirm?" "The rumors about Taijin." The room became quiet. "He has been visiting a small restaurant in Itaewon every night." Sung-minute frowned. "That means nothing." But the informant continued. "He brings his daughter with him." That sentence made Sung-minute sit up slowly. His daughter? Yes. The girl who stopped speaking after the attack years ago. Sung-minute leaned back in his chair. His expression slowly turned into a cold smile. "And?" The informant hesitated before answering. "There's also a woman. A waitress. A foreigner." Sung-minute tapped his finger slowly against the table. "What kind of foreigner?" "African." Now Sung-minute's smile widened. "And Taijin brings his daughter to see her every night?" "Yes, boss." According to witnesses, the child only responds to that woman. For a moment, the room was completely silent. Then Lee Sung-minute laughed quietly. For years he had searched for Taijin's weakness. And now, he had found it. Meanwhile, across the city, Io Adeyemi was finishing her shift at the restaurant. The night air of Itaewon was cool as she stepped outside. Neon lights reflected off the wet pavement from an earlier rain. Io stretched her tired arms. Working 2 jobs left her exhausted every day. But tonight something felt different. She smiled softly as she thought about Minute. The little girl had laughed again tonight. A quiet giggle during the hand-clapping game they played. Io had almost cried when it happened. But she had no idea that someone was watching her. A black sedan sat parked across the street. Inside, 2 men observed her carefully. "Is that the woman?" one asked. "Yes." "The waitress." They watched as Io walked toward the subway station. "Boss wants her followed," the driver said. "No mistakes." The car slowly began moving. At the same time, Kang Taejin was sitting in his office again. But tonight he felt uneasy. Park Do-hyun stood nearby. "Boss," he said quietly. "Something unusual happened today." Taejin looked up. "What is it?" One of Sungmin's men was seen near the restaurant. The room instantly became tense. Taejin's eyes darkened. "How long?" 2 days. That meant Sungmin had already noticed something. And in the Mafia world, that could only mean one thing. Trouble was coming. Taejin stood slowly. "Double the security around Minute Seo," he ordered. "Yes, boss." "And the waitress?" Do-hyun paused. Taejin rarely showed concern for outsiders. But this situation was different. Without Io, Minute Seo would return to silence again. "Protect her too," Taejin said. Do-hyun nodded. "Understood." But even Taejin didn't realize how quickly things were about to spiral out of control. 2 nights later, the restaurant was unusually quiet. Io walked toward the familiar booth carrying Minute Seo's soup. The little girl was already watching her. Waiting. Io smiled warmly. "Hello again, Minute Seo." The girl's eyes sparkled softly. As Io sat beside her and began humming the lullaby again, Taejin watched quietly from across the table. This simple moment had become the most important part of his day. But suddenly, the restaurant door slammed open. 3 men entered. Their faces cold. Their eyes scanning the room. Taejin immediately recognized them. Lee Sungmin's soldiers. His bodyguards instantly stood up. Customers began whispering nervously. The men ignored everyone. They walked directly toward the table. And stopped in front of Io. One of them smiled cruelly. "So, you're the woman who makes the boss's daughter smile." Io froze. She had no idea what was happening. The man leaned closer. "Our boss would like to meet you." Across the table, Kang Taejin slowly stood up. His voice dropped to a deadly whisper. "Touch her. And none of you leave this restaurant alive." The entire room went silent. Everyone could feel it. The tension. The danger. A war that had been quiet for years was about to explode. And right in the middle of it was a waitress who had only wanted to help a lonely child. The restaurant had never felt so tense. Customers sat frozen in their chairs. No one dared to move. The 3 men from Lee Sungmin's gang stood confidently near the table, their dark suits slightly open to reveal the outlines of weapons beneath. Across from them stood Kang Taejin, the most feared mafia boss in Seoul. His eyes were cold. His voice quiet. But everyone in the room could feel the danger. The man who had spoken to Io chuckled. "Relax, Taejin," he said casually. "We're not here to cause trouble." Taejin didn't respond. He simply stared at them. The man continued. "Our boss just wants a conversation with the woman." Io looked confused. "What? I don't even know your boss." The man ignored her. He stepped forward. One of Taejin's bodyguards instantly moved in front of him. "Take another step," the guard warned, "and you'll regret it." For a moment, it seemed like violence would erupt right there. Then the gang member smiled again. "You're right," he said calmly. "This isn't the right place." He turned toward Taejin. "But tell your little singer something." His eyes shifted toward Io. "Boss Sungmin will see you soon." The men walked out of the restaurant. But the threat they left behind filled the room like poison. That night, Taejin returned to his mansion in the hills overlooking Seoul. Minute Seo had already fallen asleep in her room. Her small face looked peaceful under the soft light of the bedside lamp. Taejin stood silently at the doorway watching her. For years he had believed power could protect everything he loved. But now, his enemies had discovered the one thing he could never afford to lose. Behind him, Park Do-hyun approached quietly. "Boss," he said. "We increased security around the restaurant and the waitress." Taejin nodded slowly. But something inside him felt unsettled. Because Lee Sungmin wasn't a careless man. If he had shown his hand this openly, it meant something worse was coming. And Taejin was right. 2 nights later, Io finished her shift earlier than usual. The streets of Itaewon were busy with music and nightlife. She waved goodbye to her co-workers and began walking toward the subway station. She didn't notice the black van slowly rolling beside the street, until the door suddenly slid open. Before she could react, strong hands grabbed her. Io screamed. But the noise of the busy street swallowed the sound. Within seconds, the van disappeared into traffic. Across the city, Kang Taejin received the call. Park Do-hyun's voice came through the phone. "Boss, they took her." Taejin stood up so quickly his chair crashed behind him. "Where?" "We're tracking the vehicle now." Taejin's eyes burned with rage. Lee Sung-minute had finally crossed the line. An hour later, Taejin's convoy of black SUVs arrived at an abandoned shipping warehouse near the Han River. The building was dark. Silent. But Taejin knew Sung-minute was inside. Do-hyun handed him a pistol. 20 men inside, he said. 12 outside. Taejin checked the weapon calmly. For years he had fought countless battles. But tonight felt different. Tonight wasn't about territory, or money, or power. Tonight was about the woman who had brought light back into his daughter's life. He looked at his men. "Move." The warehouse doors exploded open. Gunfire erupted instantly. Taejin's men moved like trained soldiers through the darkness. Shots echoed through the metal building. Criminals shouted. Men fell. Within minutes, the fight was over. Bodies lay scattered across the warehouse floor. At the far end of the room, Lee Sung-minute sat calmly in a chair. Io was tied to another chair beside him. She looked terrified. Sung-minute clapped slowly as Taejin approached. "Impressive as always," he said. "You always did know how to make an entrance." Taejin's voice was ice. "You should have stayed hidden." Sung-minute laughed. "I wanted to see the woman who turned the great Kang Taejin into a worried father." Taejin raised his gun. "Let her go." Sung-minute leaned forward slightly. "You know what's funny? For years I searched for your weakness. And it turns out, it wasn't your daughter." His eyes shifted toward Io. "It was her." Before he could finish his sentence, Taejin fired. The gunshot echoed through the warehouse. Lee Sung-minute collapsed. The war was over. Taejin rushed forward and untied Io. "Are you hurt?" he asked. She shook her head, still shaken. I don't understand any of this." Taejin helped her stand. "You don't need to." The next evening, Io returned to the restaurant. She almost didn't come. But something pulled her back. When she entered, she saw them immediately. Taejin sitting in the corner booth. Minute Seo beside him. Io approached slowly. "Hello again," she said softly. Minute Seo looked up at her. Her eyes bright. Io sat down beside the girl. And gently began humming the lullaby once again. The familiar melody filled the room. Then suddenly, Minute Seo reached for her hand. The restaurant grew quiet. The little girl opened her mouth slowly. Her voice was small, fragile, but clear. "Io." The spoon fell from Taejin's hand. His daughter had spoken. Her first word in 3 years. Tears filled his eyes. For the first time in his life. The powerful Mafia boss didn't care who saw him cry. Because in that moment he understood something. All the power in the world couldn't heal a broken heart. But kindness could. And from that day forward, Io Adeyemi was no longer just a waitress in Seoul. She became the woman who saved the heart of a mafia king's daughter. And changed his life forever.